Well, I suppose we could look ahead to 2025. You know what? Yeah, why not? Let's do that. Let's look ahead to 2025 and what the Ducks could look like a year from now on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason J.D. Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FANDUEL.COMand to get started. So I am the public address voice for the Coachella Valley Firebirds and also have contributed to Defend the Nest, among other things. Let's get started and talk about 2025. Wait, why aren't we looking ahead to this season? I'll give you a few reasons why. Lack of free agent signings were chief among them. Lack of trades could have applied here, but really it's all of the above. It's the fact that the trades, not many happened. The signings, not many happened. And there's a lot of question marks for the future of the roster after this season. And I thought, why not address it right now? While, I'll just be honest here, why not just do this while CapFriendly is still up while we have it? Because in case you missed that bit of news about a month ago, CapFriendly will be shutting down, one of the best websites out there. And they have a really awesome tool on here that gives you like signings for certain seasons. You get to edit your team. And it's a really cool little feature. I've always liked this one, and this is what I've used some of my projections in the past for. And it has been refined. It's gotten better. And just as it's gotten better, it gets shut down. Go figure. So I thought, why not look into 2025-26? So here's who is signed past this season. So these are the Ducks right now, as of right now, that are signed past 24-25. Troy Terry, $7 million. Alex Killorn, $6.25 million. Ooh. Trevor Zegras, $5.75. All right. Ryan Strome, $5 million. Ross Johnston, $1.1 million. Leo Carlson, $950,000. Cutter Gauthier, $950,000. Jansen Harkins, $787,000. Cam Fowler, $6.5 million. Radko Gudas, $4 million. Pavel Mintyukov, just under $1 million. Olin Zellweger, just under $1 million. So there's a long list of names that we still don't know about. And I'm going to start with, I'll start with Lukáš Dostal. He's got one more year left on his contract. I think it would be prudent for the Ducks to re-sign him, maybe even this offseason, but maybe even during the season. Re-sign Dostal. He's clearly ascended the ranks of goaltending. He should be a number one goaltender. I would say starting this season, he should be your number one goalie. Yes, John Gibson is still there. Yes, he is still very good. But Dostal has proven time and time again that he is that guy. Like, what else does Dostal have to do to get that starting job? I think one thing that has to happen is John Gibson would have to be traded, or he would just have to be let go. But most likely traded either during this year's trade deadline or next season's off season. And I know that 2-year term scares a lot of teams. The $6.4 million scares a lot of teams. But as of right now, Gibby's still your guy. But with 2 years left, re-sign Dostal to a few seasons. Jackson Lacombe, he still hasn't been signed yet. Then you have Vaakanainen, Brian Dumoulin. They're free agents. Then there's this long list of free agents after this season. Robbie Fabry, Isaac Lundestrom, Brett Leeson, Sam Colangelo, Carson Meyer, Mason McTavish, Frank Vetrano. Some pretty big names there. So I decided to go on CapFriendly and re-sign some of those guys first. And what I did was I did free agent signings for Lukasz Dostal, Mason McTavish, Jackson Lacombe, Isaac Lundestrom, Frank Vetrano. And for a couple of these, I'll admit there was absolutely zero rhyme or reason as to the money amount. None whatsoever. So I decided to re-sign Lukasz Dostal for 4 seasons. He could get more than that. And I put the cap hit at $4 million just because I think he deserves more personally. But Dostal, $4 million per season the next few years, I could live with that big time. Mason McTavish, I gave him a $7 million contract, which matches Troy Terry. That's fine. McTavish getting 7 per season, I am totally okay with that as he's entering his prime. I put Jackson Lacombe at $2.4 million for the same reason. Isaac Lundestrom, I put out $1.75 million. And Frank Vetrano, I just went straight $5 million. So as I'm putting this on the screen right now, you can see what that roster would look like and the salary cap that's projected next season and the cap hit. And I could always mess around with these lines, but I've got Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry, Frank Vetrano on that top line. That could change. Then you have Leo Carlson, Alex Killorn, Cutter Gauthier on that second line. Then you got Mason McTavish, Ryan Strome, Ross Johnston. Okay. Then Isaac Lundestrom, Beckett Seneca, and Jansen Harkins. Yeah, you know what? I think there's a need for a left winger at some point. There is. On the defense, this one I tried to make it as even as possible, and I think this works. Cam Fowler, Radko Gudas top line. Then you have Pavel Mintyukov, Tristan Luneau on that second line. I think some folks forgot about Tristan Luneau. He did play a few games in Anaheim, looked good in those few games. And I think Luneau could make the team, I would say, easily next season. Then you have Olin Zellweger and Jackson Lacombe. I think by this point, the youth movement is really going to take place. And we're going to see the ascension of Pavel Mintyukov. And we're really going to see Olin Zellweger shine. Maybe even starting this year, but I would say next season, the 25-26 season, that's where we can really see his development really take shape and him take over. And then you have John Gibson, Lukasz Dostal as your goaltenders. So with those signings, the cap hit is $68.44 million, which by projections would be just above the cap space, or above the cap floor rather. They would have about $23.5 million left to spend. That's a crap ton of money, folks. I mean, I don't know if you agree with those numbers. Again, there was really no rhyme or reason for a couple of these. I think the one player that I really tried to give a good figure on was Mason McTavish, because McTavish, he is still very young. He is still improving. He is one of your cornerstones on this young Ducks core, and he needs to be paid accordingly. So I'm kind of understanding a little bit more why the Ducks didn't go full out as far as post day one signings, or didn't try to overpay as much, which is fine, because they still got some re-signings to do with still a lot of money to spend. And the free agent pool for next season, it's a pretty good one. I would say the free agent pool for next offseason is better than the one we had this season. And I'll talk about those names on the other side. And now a brief word from FanDuel. And folks, I love sports, but it's the dog days of summer, and I never want the sports to stop. And, the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. Yeah, it's only baseball. And I know baseball has been dead to me in the past, blah, blah, blah. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going wherever and whenever I want, including the dog days of summer in baseball. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Like futures bets, could the Dodgers win the World Series? And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FANDUEL.COMand and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please Gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. So I kind of gave some of what I thought the roster could look like if certain re-signings happen. Now, I didn't look into 2026, but there are a couple of guys that I think we kind of have to watch out for. And these are the obvious three rather. Cutter Gauthier, Leo Carlsson, Trevor Zegras. Z's already getting 5.75. He can get about 7 or 8. And the salary cap could go up another few million for 26-27. So you got Zegras to worry about. You got Leo Carlsson to worry about. You got Cutter Gauthier to worry about. You've got Pavel Mintyukov, Olen Zellweger. All guys that are going to garner a lot of money. But I think there's going to be enough money left over. There could be about $28-29 million left over for 26-27 if the cap does go up a lot. In that case, there would still be enough money for the Ducks to go after a pretty sizable free agent next season. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this graphic on the board. Huzzah! I didn't go ka-chow. I thought about it. And what I have here are the list of free agents for next season that are 35 and under. I purposely didn't go 35 and older because most of them are either going to be really old, they're going to retire. So there's some interesting names on this list. John Tavares, Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner could garner a lot of money by then. He is 28 now. He would be 29, 30 by the time that contract starts. So that could be a big overpay. Mikko Rantanen would be a really interesting one. Also at 30 years old. He could also get a crap ton of money. But, I mean, come on. 104 points last season. That guy is one of the best forwards in the league that doesn't get enough credit. So I'm going to give it up for Mikko Rantanen. See if the Ducks could maybe go after him. Leon Draisaitl would be a free agent. I mean, I couldn't imagine splitting up McDavid and Draisaitl. I think Leon gets re-signed. He does show up on this list, but I think he gets re-signed. And then you have Ryan Johansson is an interesting one. Dmitry Orlov's an interesting one. Aaron Ekblad is an interesting choice for defense, and so is Ivan Provorov. Provorov could prove to be a solid player in his latter seasons. Brock Besser, almost a point a game. 28 years old now. Also in that 29-30 range where he could get a pretty decent amount of money. So we'll see how those guys go. Then you have Nikolai Ehlers, Vladislav Gavrikov from the Kings. Who else is on here? Andrew Mangiapane's an interesting one. I forgot that Igor Shesterkin doesn't have a supremely long-term deal with the Rangers. They're going to re-sign Shesty. They're going to re-sign him. I don't think he should be on this list. And then you have Shea Theodore's on this list. Can you imagine the return of Shea Theodore to the Anaheim Ducks? I mean, I could see it happening. Some other names that are not on this graphic that could be appealing choices would be Jacob Chychrun, who's currently with the Washington Capitals. That would be a good signing for the Ducks too. Chychrun is pretty good. Sam Bennett, I think he gets re-signed. Carter Verhaeghe, I think, gets re-signed. There's a really young defenseman here that could get big bucks. I would say $8 to $9 million if he plays his cards right. Noah Dobson, only 25 years old. He scored 70 points in 79 games for the Isles. Noah Dobson, I think, might be one of those, not unheralded, but someone that doesn't get talked about by everybody because you have a lot of other defensemen on this list, like an Aaron Ekblad, like a Provorov, like a Gavrikov, like a Shea Theodore. You see where I'm going here? And I think we got to talk about him a little bit. Also on this list that's super interesting on this list is Evan Bouchard, who's only 25 right now with the Oilers. If the Oilers don't live up to expectations, if they have like a decent-ish season, Could they be buyers? Could they be selling off some guys like Bouchard, who has 1 year left on his contract? And all these guys that I'm naming could also be trade targets in next season's trade deadline. And depending on how some of those teams do, they could be big trade targets. I could see Taylor Hall on that list being a big trade target. He's currently with the Blackhawks right now. Provorov could be a massive trade target. So could Ryan Johansson. These are teams that are not going to be going very far, if into the playoffs at all. So those might be your biggest target players in the draft. Same with Andrei Kuzmenko, who could have a big target on his back as far as the trade deadline is concerned. Just to round out some names, Frank Vetrano is on this list. Bowen Byram's on this list. Keandre Miller's on this list. There's some pretty top-end talent on this list for next season's free agent pool. It'll be interesting to see what the Ducks do with all that money. I did the whole thing with those signings, as you saw in the previous segment. There's a lot of money to spend for the Ducks. They have to go after some of these guys. And even on a trade, even if there's a trade that the Ducks can get one of those guys, and this is assuming that the Ducks actually have a decent enough season where they're in the playoff hunt come February, March, or come the Four Nations tournaments. If the Ducks are still doing okay by that point, then there's no reason why they couldn't go after one of these guys on the trade deadline and take up some cap space for the rest of the season, because you never know. It is a crapshoot. It really is. So let me know, which of those names do you think intrigues you the most? I mentioned a couple that I think intrigues me a lot, but that's a year in the making. I mean, we haven't even played this season yet, and we're talking about the following season. But I thought it was a fun exercise to look ahead, just in case. And I do think CapFriendly is probably gonna go bye-bye late this week, so may as well do this now while I have a chance. All right, let's head to the second intermission, and after that, I will just have some final thoughts on the future of the Ducks on the other side. Welcome back to episode 905 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. All right, I'm going to give my final thoughts here before we wrap up. And this is kind of going to be a little bit of honesty hour here. I realize that a lot of Ducks fans are frustrated, and I get that. But I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what was said in last night's Locked On NHL. This was with the other JD Young, and Seth Topol. And they were talking about, the higher echelon teams, the teams in the middle, and the teams in the bottom, like the bottom dwellers. And obviously for both hosts, the Ducks were among the bottom dwellers, but they brought up an interesting question. They brought up the point, or the question of, out of those bottom dwelling teams, which one do you think has a chance to make some noise? Which one can at least kind of be in it late in the season? And JD, great JDs think alike, he chose the Ducks, and he gave some succinct reasons. And he even said, they've been in a rebuild forever, and they've had so many high draft picks that at some point they all have to come together. Everything has to mature, and everything has to, get to a point where these players can contribute, right? And that's honestly kind of what the Ducks have to do right now, is they do have to stand pat a little bit, but they have to wait and see how these guys develop. And that roster that I showed you, that's still a young roster, folks. And you want to talk about, age. Frank Vetrano is still older, but Z is still young. Terry's still not young, but he's middle. Leo Carlson, young. Cutter Gauthier, young. McTavish, Seneca. Yeah, those are 5 really young guys. And then you have Mintyukov, Luneau, Lacombe, Zellweger. That's half their team, if you include Dostal. half the team is 23, 24 and under. This is a young Ducks team that are still learning to play together. A lot of these guys haven't really played together yet. Seneca obviously just got drafted. Cutter Gauthier, he's looking to go up this season. Only played one game last season. In that one game, we saw what he could do. Leo Carlson had his first full season last year. McTavish, he's still young. Z is still young, obviously. Luneau, Lacombe, Zells, Minty. This is what the Ducks have to hang their hat on a little bit. With all that cap space, you could look forward to these young guys just flourishing soon. So what JD said is absolutely right. It is. The Ducks they're going to be fine. And he also used the word patience. Actually, I know JD and I have talked off air. And that's the one thing that I've always said about these Ducks teams is you just have to have patience. This is a rebuild that is done right and not just a retooling. You're not spending a crap load of money on over-bloated contracts. I know the Ducks have already, I'm dropping stuff here. The Ducks have already done that a couple of times, unfortunately, and it hasn't worked out. The 1 year John Klingberg deal, thank God that was only one season. It could have been a lot worse. So Pat Verbeek is, he has a strategy. He has some kind of plan. It hasn't gone to perfection, but there is still a plan in place. And a lot of that revolves around the young guys. So I know I've said this a million bajillion times, and I'm going to keep saying it all season long. Have patience, folks. All right, that's going to do it for this podcast. Once again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, ad-free on Amazon, by the way, and also hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Thanks to everyone that has commented. I'll eventually get back to all of them. I will eventually. Also, the mailbag is open, so you can send me your questions, lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. You could DM me or find me on Twitter X. My personal Twitter X is at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. Once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez, saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there, stay cool, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.